everything, press, popular culture, walking through the world says you need to grow. You constantly need to grow. How fast you're growing. You put out the metrics as to how many employees do you have? How many clients have you added? How many users are you serving? There is unquestionably so many positives from growing. And again, I started and it was 2 of us, then it was 3 of us. Now we're close to 100 of us. And it creates opportunities. You impact a greater swath of human beings, but it can't dictate all of your actions.
You're listening to Home Care Hindsight, the podcast where we talk with home care leaders about the big mistakes they've made and the even bigger lessons they've learned along the way. I'm David Knack, head of sales here at Zingage, and I've built a career on the idea that we learn a whole lot more from our mistakes than from our successes, which is great because I've made a lot of mistakes. I've gotten to know some of the leaders in this industry who've built amazing businesses and are super well respected. So I thought it'd be fun, instead of asking them about the great things they've accomplished, to have them tell the story of one of the biggest mistakes that they've made and how that mistake changed their thinking and the way they run their business. All right, we are back with another episode of Home Care Hindsight, brought to you by Zingage, the leading caregiver engagement platform. I am joined by John Lariccia, CEO of Welcome Home. John, welcome to the show.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, I'm super excited to be here. We've known each other for a while, longer than I've known anybody else in home care, candidly, because we met actually in a previous company when we were both serving the senior living world. So for people who are not familiar with you or your company, how would you introduce yourself?
Sure. So as Dave mentioned, my name is John Lariccia. I am one of the 2 founders of Welcome Home Software, based here in Atlanta, originally from Ohio, but it dawned on me that I've lived in Atlanta longer than I've lived anywhere else. Been here for now 25 years. Welcome Home Software is a sales tool, in particular, a customer relationship management platform that's designed specifically for home care. It was built from the absolute bottom up to serve the needs of owners and operators in the home care space. We also do the exact same thing in senior living, and I could talk as to how these things all came together. But that is it in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really stands out to me about your journey as a company is you did not come, see the dollar signs in home care and come running over here. I mean, it was a much more organic kind of journey into home care. So can you talk a little bit about how you guys made it here? And maybe more importantly, why wasn't there already an incumbent solution that was taking care of this industry?
Yeah, no, I don't want to get preachy right out of the gates, but I have 5 children and I tell them all the time, don't do anything for money, right? You're not going to find joy if that's your North Star. And I didn't get into software for senior living for the money. I didn't get into it for home care for the money. It all came out of seeing people that I really wanted to help and I really respected and thinking that I could. I started as an attorney. My journey started as an attorney, and that probably was the last time that I did anything for money. And rapidly realized that there were a lot of miserable attorneys out there. And so then I went into management consulting, and I did sales and marketing, performance improvement for 2 decades. And I did it across a whole holy host of industries. And 15 years ago, I had the dumb luck, good fortune, whatever you want to call it, to work with a operator. It was a pro bono project down in Florida. They serve seniors. So they had a full slate of residential programs, the independent living, assisted living, memory care. And then they also had at-home services, home health, hospice, and private duty home care. And what struck me was the mission's amazing. The people were wonderful, but the technology supporting them was really subpar, and the companies behind them weren't much better. And it's a hard job, right? It is an incredibly difficult job, whether you're serving any of those, if you're in home care, senior living, hospice, home health, where you're asking often a single person who is undertrained to do B2B sales, to develop refers, and talk at a very sophisticated clinical level, often minutes later in their car engaging with family members, which could be incredibly tense. No one was helping them, right? The technology wasn't built for them. Now I'm not that bright, so I spent 10 years trying to solve that problem with PowerPoint slides and training. And eventually in 2017, I'm like, well, this doesn't seem to be getting solved. There's a lot of CRMs, there's a lot of sales tools out there, but they weren't looking at these particular users in these end markets. And I'm like, let's just build it. And again, dumb luck, I found my co-founder, my chief technology officer, and told him what I saw. He was hooked. And we then went on a 2-year journey together to listen to a ton of users, to build something from scratch, and to launch it. And our dream big was, could we get 1,000 users someday, right, across home care and senior living? And if that was the case, and we had 20 employees, and we felt personally fulfilled, that'd be a great chapter to our professional lives.
That's amazing. Well, I want to transition to a part of this show where I ask the question, what kind of person are you? And so in order to ask that, I want to ask you about the current hobby that you talk about, or the obsession that you talk about, that you see other people's eyes start to glaze over as soon as you mention it.
Yeah, sadly, there's a few. But I'll pick the one that also links with the founding of Welcome Home. When I started Welcome Home back in 2017, I thought that I needed a hobby, because apparently starting a business isn't enough. So I bought a 1956 MG Model A in North Carolina, and drove it home. And I have been tinkering with this thing for going on 8 years. And as my abilities have declined, I can already see you're glazing over. My ambitions have increased. And so now I want to electrify it. So not only do I want to complete the restoration of the car, but it's perfectly functional. It runs. Yeah. Well, as a 1956 car built in England could run, but I want to rip out the internal combustion engine and I want to electrify it.
Yes. I know so little about cars that I had to change my car battery. And that felt like I did it, but I had my father-in-law come over. I had the flu when he came over, and so he risked life and limb to change the battery in my car. So I know nothing about cars. And when you first mentioned that, I was like, I'm pretty sure this is a car, but it could also be a motorcycle, and I would have no idea. My electrification question is, are you going to have the fake engine noises coming out of it once you've electrified it?
Oh, look at you. I had not thought about that. But the answer is no. I'm not going to do that.
I think that's the right choice. I think maybe there's like a public safety piece to like having like it sound like an engine, because otherwise it's just a secret, car going through space. But yeah, exactly. Okay. Well, John, I'm glad you're on the show. I brought you on here because you've had, I think, a successful career, have helped a lot of folks to improve their sales and marketing processes and all that kind of stuff. But we're not here to talk about any of that. Instead, I want to hear about the big mistake that you made and how that changed the way that you think about your business. So, John, what's your big mistake?
You just want one?
Yeah, just one for now.
Just one for now. I mean, I think the big mistake is chasing growth, right? That was the first big mistake that I learned. Everything, press, popular culture, walking through the world says you need to grow. You constantly need to grow. How fast you're growing. You put out the metrics as to how many employees do you have? How many clients have you added? How many users are you serving? And there is unquestionably so many positives from growing. And again, I started, and it was 2 of us, then it was 3 of us. Now we're close to 100 of us. And it creates opportunities. You impact a greater swath of human beings, but it can't dictate all of your actions, because you can find, like a car, things can get out of sync, right?
Sure.
And very early when we started the company, we had a burst, right? There was this rush. People hadn't seen anything like us before. And there were 6 of us. And we started to realize that client number 5 wasn't going to have the same experience when they came on board, when they switched their CRM, that client 4, the client 3, the client 2 had. And change is difficult, right? And a CRM, a software tool, is only as good as it's being used. And so we outkicked our coverage. We pulled a hamstring, whatever metaphor that you want to use. But we got out of sync. Our ability to serve our clients in the way that we wanted was compromised because we had too many clients.
Yeah.
And so I did what my sales team, at the point, it was a single guy,
Right.
thought was unthinkable. When I told him stop, I'm like, don't sell. Just tell people no, right? That we're not ready. And it had such benefits externally and internally. Internally, the team had a moment and said, okay, we're going to do this differently. We're not just chasing a metric, right? We're not just doing this for the money. And what we've been saying about our clients need to have a consistent, highly customized, very white glove, first-class experience from the first moment they work with us throughout, is not just something that we're painting on a wall as a slogan. That's who we are. And then for the folks that we said no, they weren't happy, but it kind of conveyed a very similar one. And so I think that it's been helpful for us ever since, which is look around, right? Yes, we have 50 times as many people as we had in the very beginning.
Sure.
But there's still only roughly 100 of us, and we can't redline, right? For the sake of growth. And so let's just make sure that we keep consistent with what actually matters.
Yeah.
And the growth will come.
I have a lot of follow-up questions, but my first throwaway line is I appreciate that you used the word redline, which ties together your experience as an attorney and also the whole car thing. So it took me half a second to figure out which one I was going to land in, but I plinkoed my way down. So I think everything that you just said, I think is something that a lot of the owners are going to really resonate with who listen to this show. Because I think there is so much emphasis on the average home care agency is doing $2 million in revenue and I'm at 800,000 in revenue. And that means that I'm, not as good as they are. I've got goals, and I think it's really smart for people to have growth goals and to have ambitious growth goals. But one of the things that I think is so challenging for home care owners is to really be clear about and qualify the kind of client that they're looking for. And so growth at all costs, if that's what we're talking about here, could mean bringing on a bunch of bad fit clients that are, need 7 or 8 hours of care a week. What caregiver is going to want to staff, 4 2-hour shifts throughout the week? That's going to be a retention nightmare. The referral source you got that from is going to be underwhelmed when they hear back from the client. It's this kind of, devolving cycle of because the vanity metric was client acquisition, was growth, was, number of hours. I think the impact of that can have some serious ripple effects. And so, as you're thinking about the home care agency owners that you talk to and all that, what would you kind of think of as like your North Star was unbelievable customer experience and delivering a ton of value? What would you say could be a North Star for home care agency owners?
Yeah, I think a North Star could be, we want to have a lifetime relationship that is deep and broad with every client that we have coming on. Right? If you sit there with that as your North Star, and that is your goal, when you bring someone on and have that initial conversation, which is, we want to be the only home care agency that your mother or you or your father works with. We are truly going to be an extension of your family. That's what you want. And that means that it's going to be a 20 hours with 3 full day shifts. That's what we find is going to be helpful. That would be the North Star, right? Where you are an extension of their family, that you truly are partnering with them. I think that is what one could have.
Yeah. When I talk to folks who are doing sales, you kind of alluded to this earlier, which is this whiplash pendulum swing that is, okay, a quarter of my time I'm doing B2B sales to referral sources. And then the other half or 3/4 of the time I am talking to clients and more often family members and doing B2B, B2C sales instead. And I think those are two very different sales motions. And typically when I talk to people, the one that they struggle with more is how to communicate the value proposition to a referral partner, because it's not peace of mind to them, like it is to an adult daughter. It's not, safety for the sake of this individual having a, long life and living in their home with dignity as long as possible. That's of course important to a referral source, but that's not the problem that they're experiencing. And so, as you think about this, like what are the kinds of steps that you see the best home care agencies take as it relates to their kind of B2B sales efforts, from identification of great referral sources to, how you approach them, to how you get in the door and past the gatekeeper? Just kind of speak to a couple of things that you've seen make the biggest difference.
Yeah. So the first thing is that you have to acknowledge that this is core to what you do, right? Oftentimes people view it as a necessary evil, right? But there has to be an intentionality, which is, no, this is as important. If I don't have great leads coming in from the top, I can't fulfill my mission of being a partner of that family. So it's critically important. And so your first is that acknowledgement. The second is, all right, let's do an identification as to where do we think those families are going to come from. And some will come from referrers that behave, think, are motivated similar to the family member. It's, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to talk with my local clergy, right? I'm going to go talk to funeral home directors. Maybe I'm going to talk with attorneys. And the value proposition will resonate the same. But more often than not, when you truly are saying who are going to be my sweet spot referrers, it's clinical, right? Mm-hmm. It's going to be clinical providers. And so you want to be regimented and regular as to, okay, fine, who do I want to go see, right? Because even within clinical, there are going to be some skilled nursing facilities that are going to not be financially qualified, are not going to have a catchment radius that's going to pull in the patients that then could be your clients. So let me look at those and set a goal, right? What is the goal? And I'm going to be both aggressive and realistic as to how long before I get my first referral and what is the upper limit of how many referrals I want to get to. So that's the next. And then finally, they plan their outreach. So after I sit there and say, all right, fine, I'm going to go to this skilled nursing with the goal that I am going to have at least one referral by the end of this month on a pathway to 10. How do I do good discovery and listen to what they say? And then how do I tailor my messages? And the very best ones, whether it's actor or chameleon, they dress the part. So when they're going to call on clergy, when they go to call on attorneys, they dress differently. They carry different brochures. Even their personality is a little more bubbly, a little more caring, a little more empathetic. But when you go into that clinical, you need to talk like a clinician, right? Not to pretend that you're at their level, but at least you are speaking the same language, right? You're going to talk about readmissions, right? You're going to talk about the trainings that your team has gone through. You're going to talk about your history when it comes to, again, them not going back into a hospital, right? And what your specialization is and why it is. And so that's what the very best ones do, which is you pick well, you personalize your messages, and you do it. Typically, you sit there and it's like, Monday is the day that I'm going to be calling on my clinicians, and I'm dressed that way. I know where I'm going. I know what I'm carrying in. And it's hard because you're taking the same messages over and over again from skill to skill, but they're just hearing it for the first time. So you just can't, you can't bore yourself by saying, oh, I'm being redundant. They have no idea. They've never heard it before.
Yep. I think two things that stand out there that are, I think, really like new and I've not really heard before is dressing the part and bringing in different like marketing materials. I think all of this marketing sales stuff is right person, right message, right time.
That's right.
And message means what you say, but also what you bring and how you present yourself. And so I think that's really insightful.
Some people would sit there when you say you're a comedian or you're an actor and you're dressing up differently and bringing different as being inauthentic. It's not inauthentic. What you're providing as a home care agency is multifaceted. It is great companionship, right? It is caring and concern, but it also has a clinical aspect to it. It has clinical outcomes to it. And so it's just a matter of emphasis of all the great things that we're doing. What of those things matter to that particular person that's going to refer to you?
And I think getting your head, I say this to salesperson, right? Yeah. Getting your head around the authenticity piece and how can I show up differently and communicate a different message to different people, but still feel like I'm a fully integrated person in touch with myself. Yeah. And that is just, there's a sales guy that I follow that calls that head trash. That is the head trash thing. And if I was showing up for my very first pitch to like a skilled nursing facility or a rehab facility or whatever, I would probably say, hey, I'm kind of new here. And take my head trash, the thing I'm anxious about. They're going to see through the fact that I'm not a clinician. Yes. And of course, we provide, very real clinical outcomes, but I'm not a nurse. I'm not a PT. I'm not a social worker. But the outcomes that we provide to families and the reason that people like yourself like working with us is because, these clinical outcomes are things that we pay really close attention to. And I think as hospital at home continues to be a, growing area of investment federally and from the payers and all that kind of stuff, being able to communicate as though you're a clinician while not pretending to be a clinician, I think is going to be such a huge competitive advantage for so many home care agencies. Absolutely
agree. And on the point of authenticity, and you mentioned sales guy to sales guy, I don't think of myself as a sales guy. I never thought about myself as a sales guy, which is obviously preposterous. I've been selling for 2 decades. But the first time that I was asked to sell, my client worked out of his home, and we had a break to have lunch, and we were having lunch out of his refrigerator.
Yeah.
And it dawned on me, Steve, his name is Steve, is a friend.
Yep.
I would sell my friend what I'm about to sell him, right? And that is what makes me comfortable, which is, and should make anyone that is doing business development in home care. If you would sell it to your neighbor, to your cousin, to your best friend, then sell it to a stranger, right? If you believe it. And if you don't believe it, I don't understand why you're doing it. Now, the good thing is in home care, no one's doing it to chase a bag, right?
Yeah.
So that could be your bedrock, right? That's what you could fall back to when you're walking into that rehab center or I had an operator or an owner talk about the window witch, right? That is guarding the hospital, right? When you're going into that hospital, especially for the very first time, you take a deep breath and say, I believe what I'm selling, right?
Yep.
What I'm doing is going to be helpful to the senior that's going to yield benefits to whoever I'm going to talk to next.
Yep.
And I just need to figure out how to convey that.
Yep. I love it. Well, let's transition to talking about something that is totally underrated in home care. You think it's really important, but it's something that the industry, as a whole undervalues.
Because people mention it so often, I think that it loses its impact, but they underrate how powerful the mission is. Going back to the earlier point, right? Which is what you're doing matters, right? It truly does. There are plenty of folks that are selling other things, that are providing other services, that it doesn't matter. I speaking to an owner just the other day who was in luxury goods at a brand that all of us have heard at a very senior level. And he now is running an agency that currently only has 3 caregivers, and he's trying to grow it. But, it's early days for him. And you look at his LinkedIn, and it's just achievement after achievement of larger company that's more well-known and larger titles in every single one. And I didn't understand. And he said, I didn't want to be creating things that ultimately don't need to be created, that eventually are going to end up in a landfill. And the mission of providing good to other human beings, and providing employment opportunities that hopefully are going to enrich the folks that work with and for you is incredibly powerful, right? It's a secret sauce. And I think that we need to continue to lean into it and find power from it.
Yeah. Well, and I think, to just kind of underline that, like the impact of in multiple people's lives of great home care, or seen the other way. I mean, this is a lot of people's story of why they're in home care in the first place is,
right.
When mom got sick, we went to home care and it totally underdelivered, and it wasn't reliable. It wasn't consistent. And I don't want anybody else to have that experience, because they know what it's like to think that you are no longer responsible for providing 24/7 care to an aging parent, and also raise kids, and also go to work, because, most people who get home care for a family member are not independently wealthy and can just, sit on the beach and drink mojitos while that's happening. I mean, the kind of economic capacity, the kind of quality of life that great home care can unlock for people has such significant ripple effects. I think it's a lot like, I'm a recent purchaser of childcare services, and the difference between great childcare that you don't have to worry about and childcare that you're not 100% confident is going to show up on time causes so many other impacts in your life that, depress economic output and all that kind of thing. And so there's such a societal good to the families that that our customers serve, and the way that makes an impact in this country.
Yeah. Yeah. And embracing it and living it helps recruiting, helps sales, helps marketing, helps operations, and ultimately cascades into finance, and it helps the owner themselves, get through those tough moments.
Yeah. Yeah, we're two guys talking about how great home care is, and neither of us have had to fill a last minute call out today. So aware of the irony that is, we get to look at just the silver lining of the clouds. Yes. But this business is tough. But I think one of the things that keeps people going is knowing that there's a lot of different things they could do with their time to build a business. But this is one that has such a huge impact on the lives of the people that they serve.
Yep.
All right, let's transition to talk about a little mistake that you see home care owners make all the time. And if they stopped, it'd make their lives or their businesses like 10 times better.
And we've already touched on this a little bit, which is there's a lack of focus, right? People want to be helpful, right? There's two different gravitational pulls that I think come at the detriment of focus and ultimately harm the agencies. The first is, I need to have revenue, right? I'm worried about paying the bills. And then the second is the altruistic, there's someone in need. They're out of range. They're out of the typical budget. They have needs that are not, but I want to be helpful.
Yeah.
And appealing and serving either one of those in the short term provides a dopamine hit, provides a revenue lift, but in the long term are so detrimental, right? Because it sends mixed messages to your team as to, okay, is this now what we're doing, right?
Yep.
Or are we going to pick up a 2-hour shift that it actually took me 2 hours of transit time to get there or not? Are we going to be taking folks that are on public assistance or not? Are we taking people with dogs or not? And then it also, from the sales team, once they see that you'll say yes, they have quotas that they need to hit. So then they're going to suddenly work the angles. Focus is so clarifying.
Yeah.
And it's hard to say no, that's just not what we're great at. That's not what I'd sell a friend. That's not what I'd provide a friend, because that's not what I'm great at, but it provides benefits down the line, right? When you sit there and say, what we're looking for are folks that have multiple needs, that have a minimum hours of 20, minimum shifts of 4, that are located within X miles of my caregivers. Until the market tells you that's not supported, you chase it, right? You tell your sales team, this is what you're selling. This is what we're great at. This is what we need to do. And that kind of clarity then starts to reinforce, right? When the caregivers are out day to day at family functions and at the schools and the like, what do? This is what we do, right? And there are others that might be great at things that we don't do, but that's just not it. And that's what I always preach, right? Which is, how do you get as focused as possible? Because who you serve is going to be linked to who the referral partners are that are going to generate those folks. It's going to be linked to who you're recruiting to serve those folks. It's going to be linked to what are the billboards that you may or may not buy? What are the church bulletins that you do or don't advertise in? What's the language that you use? What's the training that you have?
Sure.
And the more that you try to do everything, the harder and harder it is, because these are all small businesses. Even those that are part of the largest franchises are still small businesses with limited support. And complexity is the sand that gets in the engine. There
it is again. That one was clearly a car thing and not a law thing, by the way.
That was clearly a car thing and not a law.
I clocked it immediately.
Yes.
And this comes back to an exercise that I think a lot of people skip over, especially early on, but is defining what your ideal client profile is. And that also requires you to say what your ideal client profile is not. Yes. I was in a business, and one of the questions that you ask is like, well, who uses your product? And my leadership would say something to the effect of like, well, anybody can use our product. And unless you are, IBM sized, or I guess Hospital Corporation of America sized, that's the wrong answer. Right. There needs to be an exact person whose name and whose color of shirt you can remember, that is the person that you serve. And that could be, folks with like some kind of cognitive impairment, like Alzheimer's or dementia, and there's certifications and trainings and all that kind of stuff. But I think for anybody who's nervous about what they're going to say to a referral source, the difference between we help seniors with activities of daily living, yada, yada, to we are the best. We do the best. Our best clients are those who have had a stroke, or who've had a fall and have had needed like hip surgery or whatever. Whatever your niche is, that first of all, you're already passionate about. But second, that is specific enough that when you ask a referral source for that referral, they actually think about who that person is rather than thinking about the 38 or 40 discharges that they had to do this week. That is such a clarifying message that helps cut through the noise and helps the referral source do a better job of being a partner to you as well.
Right. Because so many people will just tell them the generic, right? And it gets washed out with everything else.
Yep.
It doesn't bring to mind, Mrs. Jones would have been perfect for you. Yeah. And so next time I see someone like Mrs. Jones or Mrs. Jones adjacent, I'll give you a call.
Yep.
And again, the more specific you describe who that person is and how you help them, it creates that earworm for them.
Yep, that's exactly right. Well, let's transition to we've talked about a lot of mistakes, but I want to end on a high note. So what's something that's happened lately in your business that you're really proud of?
We're moving, which is a big win. So as we get closer and closer to 100 employees, and I'm a dinosaur, as evidenced by the fact that I have a fixation with a car that was built decades before I was. And so we're moving offices. And so, that's a big win. I love seeing my team members in person, and right now we're in an office, but 3 different that are scattered, and so we're gonna have one place. So that's cool. A big win. Yeah.
Well, I've known your folks for a while, but I think something that stands out is you guys bring in such energetic, fun to be around people. And so as you guys are on the event circuit this spring and summer, It's always a good time to hang out with the folks from Welcome Home. They're really great to chat with. So before we get out of here, what do you want to plug? Where can people find you?
Yeah, so we would love to work with more home care operators. What we think is making a difference is putting amazing technology in their hands. So if you look at welcomehomesoftware.com, you could find us. There's a pop-up that will ask if you want to book a demo. We'd love to show you what we have.
Awesome. Well, John, thanks so much for coming on the show today. Really appreciate the time and really love what you guys are doing for sales and marketing teams in the home care space.
All right. Thanks, David.
On behalf of the team here at Zingage, thanks for listening to the show. We'll be back next week with another episode, so be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts on Spotify or Apple or YouTube. Leave us a rating while you're there. It helps other people find the show. If you have comments on the show, drop me a line, david@zingage.com. Would love to hear from you, chat with you there.